The series made me unironically lose brain cells. The main character dies from the typical Japanese woman he probably cheated on, then got isekai into a fantasy world as a goblin. Though for context, this idiot was a super cannibal that killed hundreds in his old world, but for his new life he decided, I'll be Mr. Nice Guy and live my best life! Except when he doesn't want to, but whatever, let's cover how broken this idiot is. Now, this guy, when he comes into the new world, he has his superpower to gain the powers of what he eats. This makes him stupid OP, stupid fast. Then he basically starts hunting everything to keep getting more and more powers, and at first it seems simple, but the stuff in the forest is seemingly infinite since there's literally no end to the amount of monster he has to fight to eat. This seems unrealistic and unbalanced for the world he lives in from an immersion standpoint. Like, there is no chance this much magic nonsense is clustered into one forest. On top of that, he just randomly gets a normal sword out of nowhere with no scene of him getting it, when before he was making his own weapons with common horns. This breaks any sense of power escalation since his powers seem to have no consistency to where and when he has them. So when he had a serious fight with the bear, it was lacking super heavily. He was pretty much using a bunch of powers that you would barely expect out of him. The only one that was well established was the webs. Other than that, randomly having regeneration, some slime abilities, and a water shield felt so out of left field, I knew nothing mattered in the fight. He then became an ogre and is seemingly just stronger than the peak of humanity in less than 2 months. So I can say, well, the fights in this series all suck, but it gets even worse later on. Though, for now, let's cover the inconsistencies in this show's writing. So we see the goblins are keeping women hostage for rape and reproduction. This is despite the goblins having their own women to breed with. The race is simply doing this for fun because they're like a race of evil. Like, there's no point, there's no reason, it's just for the sake of evil. The women live in poor living conditions, they're not even clothed, they're just naked to get raped immediately. This leads to the women killing themselves, and the goblins seem to mourn them, asking, why would they do such a thing? This is the same guy who was doing an evil laugh over this kidnapping and assaulting the women. He was laughing! He was laughing at the idea, but he's going, why would they do such a thing? The goblin women seem to be normal females, and from other goblins' opinion, they seem to be attractive, so there's no logical reason from a gene standpoint why they would try to make enemies with humans. This doesn't do anything to fix the show's writing, it's just so bad! This show seems to have terrible ideas of normal behavior and logic. It's painful to hear and watch, so after the women get kidnapped, and not raped, at first sight, they fall in love with their capturer and get Stockholm Syndrome in 5 minutes. This then leads to all the female characters existing to simp over the male lead. It's most noticeable with the red woman, because like, her entire storyline gets her called feisty all the time. But like, every time she's on screen, she's the most submissive thing in existence. Like, at every interaction, she's just so submissive. Also, the goblin chick turns fully into a love interest. There is nothing else to her anymore, much like any other woman in the show. I would have mentioned her, but she's so irrelevant, I decided that there was simply no point. The biggest example of the show's problem was in episode 3, during the events of the wizard's lair. So a random carbuncle shows up because the lair of the wizard is literally within walking distance of the goblin hut. Just a super rare wizard's lair, just like in walking distance, no explanation. Then she tells them to help her because the adventurers are trying to kill her and take the gem and rob the wizard's lair. At BTW, she was already going to die anyway, so there's like no point. Ogre Guy then gives a hypocritical speech saying, you guys can't just go into somebody else's house, then take all their property, that's wrong. He then gives a minor tolerance to them, saying you should run, because he promises human women he would actively show some mercy, but because the adventure party justifiably does not trust a monster that kills and eats people all the time, based on their race, they do not listen, then fight him. He kills and eats them, then proceeds to take the gem from the dying carbuncle, then takes all the wizard's shit, then desecrates a corpse, and is super rewarded with a new magic arm after losing his only a few days ago, meaning his loss of it meant nothing. Also, he did the same thing the adventure party was going to do, so ultimately the only thing that changed was who got rewarded, but the result was still the same. Though him winning basically made him a hypocrite, and he preached nonsense and downplayed humanity, making him racist. Then there's the final scene of episode 3 of them having sex with every woman showed in the series, save one girl. But while that was cringe and terrible, I more want to talk about the awful dialogue with that bitch saying, I learned not all goblins are bad people, and that some of them are good. This bitch, if not for the man, she would have been sexually assaulted and tortured. If not for this super cannibal that was killing and eating people in his old world, randomly developing ethics, she would be a broken mess. All the goblins by default are shown as evil and will do terrible things. The show's own statements and writing is illogical nonsense. Everything about the series feels like it was written by an edgy 13-year-old with no clue how basic human interactions work. But aside from the bad dialogue, the generic art is almost as bad. The designs of the goblins look more like aliens than any form of goblin monster. They're so lacking in the goblin look, they mostly come across as either humans or aliens of some kind. Almost none of them look like the intended monster. Which is why it's odd to me that this isekai seems to operate on RPG rules, with all of them people having like an inner level in their head, and if the number goes really high, it makes them evolve into a stronger monster. The way levels work and how much anything gives as a level is never explained. This is even worse with the dialogue the main character gives in the third episode about the adventure party only relying on levels makes them bad since their basic skills are not good enough. Which makes no sense since the one doing that is actually him. They're just fighting and killing, which seems to be the thing that made him stronger in the first place. The one in this fight that seems to be overusing levels is him! Since he just tanks anything they do because he is so overpowered and broken. Like, what is he talking about? He literally isn't winning with any form of skill or tactic, he's just broken and overpowered. You see, like, I can, like, repeat myself. Broken and overpowered, broken and overpowered, broken and overpowered, broken and overpowered. Motherfucker just wins because, like, he's just him. He's just so broken that he doesn't actually even try to do anything. Another problem this show has is that there's no actual plot point or anything going on. He literally has no goals, no motives other than to survive, so the plot is just kind of slice of life with most of the boring characters being put to paper on screen. So I don't know what the saving grace of this show is. The plot sucks, the action is terrible, and the world building is non-existent and convenient. Anyway, I feel I've done a good job in displaying why the show has terrible writing and world building with even worse fights. As such, my work is done. I hope everyone will avoid watching this show and will check out Full Metal Alchemist 2003, which actually is a good series unlike this trash. With that, peace. People begged me to rip into the show, BTW. Don't know what that says about it. Check.